Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for How the Illinois Retirement Law Affects Your Business. I'm Rebecca Chauncey, a business advisor here at the Illinois Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, at Bill Bronzeville. Pleased to connect with you this afternoon. This training is brought to you at no cost because it's funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the US SBA, or the United States Small Business Administration, the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and the Urban Juncture Foundation. Please note a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions today, please type them in the Q&A section, which you should see if you move your mouse to the bottom of your screen. There's Q&A. Type your questions there, and if relevant in the moment, they will be addressed by the presenters. I will share the question with them so that they can answer, and then there will be time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. And again, all those questions should be filtered under Q&A. And secondly, please be sure you're taking great notes, but if you attend, you stay for the entire duration of the session, you'll receive a link to the recording of this as well. And so you may want to remind yourself of things, and that recording will help you to do so. So without further ado, I am so pleased to pass the mic over, if you will, to today's presenters. And we are happy to work with the Illinois Treasurer's Office for this session. Christine, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate you having us on today. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. Want to get started in a second here, but just for introduction purposes, I'm Christine Chang. I work on the Illinois Secure Choice Retirement Savings Program here at the Illinois State Treasurer's Office. Just to make the connection, the Treasurer chairs the 7-member public board that oversees the Illinois Secure Choice Program, and so our office is involved in helping the board to implement the program. I'm also joined today by Jamie Niles from Ascensus. Ascensus is the third-party administrator for the program that contracts with the board to help with those services, and Jamie is herself a resource to you as an employer and to employees in the program as well. So you'll hear from both of us today, and as Rebecca mentioned, please feel free to use the Q&A feature anytime you have a question, and we're certainly happy to get to those questions. So let's go ahead and get started. So just to give you a little bit of a roadmap as to where we are heading today, so we'll talk about the actual Illinois state law that impacts small businesses related to retirement options. We'll talk about what Illinois Secure Choice as a program is, kind of key features. Jamie will then talk about what the perspective is from an employer who is facilitating the program for their employees, how they interface with our online portal, etc. She'll also talk about what options a participant in the program will have in terms of savings opportunities. And then we'll let you know about some additional resources and support that you can access. So we'll go ahead and lead off with why the state of Illinois decided to do something in the realm of retirement savings access. So when we zoom out and we look at the entire landscape of retirement savings in our state, in our country, what becomes apparent very quickly is that we have a looming retirement savings crisis, wherein too many people have too little saved for their retirement. And this is an issue that is going to be exacerbated by the rising cost of living expenses that we're experiencing now, and also the fact that many people are living longer, so they're having to have more put away to have a secure and safe retirement. So, the retirement savings crisis is a problem on multiple levels. On the individual level, of course, it's a poor outcome if a worker reaches the end of their career, doesn't really have enough to subsist on financially. It's also a poor situation on a macro level, on a state level in terms of additional expenses. So just to give a little additional detail here, nearly half of working age families across the country have nothing at all saved formally in their retirement accounts. So that's just meant to point you to the fact that we do have a massive gap in what people have saved and what they actually need for a secure retirement. Related to that more kind of macro level, bigger picture impact on our state, on our taxpayers, Illinois alone is projected to face $8.8 billion in additional costs over a 20-year period related to this lack of retirement savings sufficiency. efficiency, and this would be because of increased reliance on public assistance programs and decreased household spending. Now, it's not all bad news. There is a proven mechanism to help more workers save, and that is something that AARP has pointed out, and it's that workers are 15 times more likely to save for retirement if they can do so at work through payroll deduction. At the same time, we do know that 40% of our private sector workers here in the state don't have access to a workplace retirement savings option. And to drill down a little bit deeper into this population that does not have access to a workplace option, these workers are disproportionately workers at smaller businesses, workers with lower wages, workers of color, and female workers. So just want to give some additional color there on who we're really trying to help in terms of this actual legislation. Now, related to the actual legislation, let's get to the specifics of what the state law is. So, the General Assembly decided to take action in 2014, leading into 2015, in passing the Illinois Secure Choice Savings Program Act. So, this state law says that certain businesses, and we'll discuss which ones, need to either sponsor their own qualified retirement plan or facilitate employee participation in the Illinois Secure Choice Program. Again, all as a way to have employees have access to an easier way to save for retirement by having that access at work. We were the first state to pass this type of legislation. We were the second state to actually launch a state facilitated retirement program when we opened up Secure Choice in 2018. But as you can see here, there is growing interest in and momentum behind these types of state facilitated programs across the country. So now we have 19 states that have enacted legislation. It's all the states that you see in the map shaded in red or pink. Now, to get into more of what Secure Choice is as a program, of course, this retirement savings program was created as part of the state law that we just discussed, and it's meant to be an easy and convenient way for Illinois workers to save for their future. The actual mechanism here, participating employees are saving a portion of their paycheck into their own individual retirement account or IRA through payroll deduction that's facilitated by their employer. As I mentioned, the program is overseen by a 7-member public board, of which the state treasurer is chair, and then administered by a private sector financial services firm, Ascensus. So again, Jamie is with Ascensus. Ascensus handles a lot of the day-to-day work related to administration of the program, including record keeping, custody. They do tax form reporting. They process withdrawal requests, things along those lines. Then I want to just highlight a few other features of the Illinois Secure Choice Program. So first thing is that this is completely voluntary on the part of employee. It is up to them whether this is the right opportunity, the right timing for them, if it meets their needs and their preferences. I will say that the program does utilize automatic enrollment as a best practice that is taken from the 401k industry, but an employee always has the choice to opt out, and even if they do opt out, they can later opt back in if their situation or their preferences change. Jamie will discuss the details of this, but the board has laid out some default settings for somebody who's participating in the program, understanding that some of our population may want to take more of a set it and forget it approach. They may want to be more passive in their engagement with this account. So Jamie will talk about those default settings, but always remember that an employee in the program can always customize their account to meet their needs. And then the last thing I want to say before we move on to more specifics of the state law and the program is about portability of this account. So as I mentioned, the vehicle of savings here is an individual retirement account that individual is very important. Keep in mind that these accounts always belong to the participants. They are not tied to employers. We have participants in our program that work for multiple employers simultaneously. We have employees who have moved from one job to another to another. This is an account that can always travel with them, that they're always in control of, and they can decide what they want to do with those funds. Next, I want to talk about which exact employers are covered by the state law. So the employers that we're talking about are employers that meet the following 3 criteria. First, that they're not already offering their own tax qualified retirement plan. Second, that they had at least 5 Illinois employees in every quarter of the previous calendar year. And third, that they've been in business for at least 2 years. So all non-governmental entities that meet those criteria need to either facilitate Illinois Secure Choice or start sponsoring their own tax qualified retirement plan. So, again, the key point here in terms of General Assembly's intent behind creating this law is to really increase access to retirement savings for Illinois workers. So, from our perspective, we always say this, we want employers to make as informed a decision as they can related to how they want to provide retirement savings access for their workers. So that includes, evaluating to the extent possible what the options are in the marketplace and really assessing too your own desires, your objectives, your capability, where you are today to really find the best fit for you. So from our perspective, if a private plan is a good fit for an employer, that's great. If Illinois Secure Choice is the right fit for an employer at this moment, that's great. The key thing is that more employers are offering access to employees, especially those employees that historically have not had easy access to a way to save for retirement. One other thing that I want to touch on before we move to employee eligibility is just the basis of that employee count that I mentioned. So I had said that this applies to employers that had at least 5 Illinois employees in every quarter of 2022. To be really specific about this, the employee count is based on quarterly withholding income tax returns that an employer is submitting to the Illinois Department of Revenue. So, very specifically, this is Form IL 941. Department of Revenue is looking at Schedule P of that IL 941 to count how many individuals are listed there as having been paid Illinois wages and having a positive amount of Illinois withholding. So those quarterly withholding income tax returns form the basis for that average employee count for the previous calendar year. Next, we'll talk about which employees are eligible to participate. So there are just 3 requirements for an employee. First, they have wages that are allocable to Illinois. Second, they're aged 18 or older. And third, that they have either a Social Security number or an individual taxpayer identification number, also known as an ITIN. So want to dig into the first requirement a little bit here. Keep in mind that the state of residence for that employee has no bearing on their eligibility. So obviously we border a number of other states. We have other state residents who work here in Illinois. The key thing is whether or not that person is being paid wages that are allocable to Illinois. Another way to frame this would be kind of in the context of what we said before about quarterly withholding income tax returns. This is again somebody that you would be reporting to Illinois Department of Revenue as having earned Illinois wages and had Illinois withholdings. I also want to point out that there's no hours worked minimum. So an employee can be part-time or full-time, temporary or seasonal. Their level of employment has no bearing on their eligibility. Another thing I want to point out here too, if you are yourself a business owner who is receiving W-2 wages from the business, you would also be considered an eligible employee, the same as any of your staff members. At the same time, I also want to mention that this program, Illinois Secure Choice, is open for self-enrollment. So that is to say, an individual who has earned income can choose to open an Illinois Secure Choice IRA, the same as any other type of IRA that they might want to open for themselves, and they don't have to do it as attached to an employer who's covered by this state law. So, for instance, somebody who works for an employer who doesn't facilitate Illinois Secure Choice, or somebody who is their own employer, who's self-employed, part of the gig economy. Those are examples of individuals that can choose to self-enroll in Illinois Secure Choice. Next, I want to talk about how we've been bringing employers into the program. So over time, we've been onboarding employers based on employer size. So when we first launched Secure Choice in 2018, we started with the state's largest employers, and then year over year, we've been approaching smaller and smaller businesses. For 2023, our focus is on 2 groups of employers. Number one, employers that had between 5 and 15 Illinois employees in 2022, and then second, a smaller group of employers that are larger than that 15 employee threshold, but that are newly on our radar this year. So those are the 2 groups of employers that we are communicating with in advance of a November 1st deadline. Now that November 1st deadline is the date by which an employer should do one of 2 things. Number one, if they're intending to put Illinois Secure Choice in place as their way to provide retirement savings options, then that's a date by which, or as close to that as you can, you should start to get that Illinois Secure Choice program in place. And Jamie will outline what the onboarding process is for that. But then secondly, you may be somebody that already has a qualified plan in place, or you're setting one up to be, in effect in the near term. So if that's your scenario, then what you would do is request an exemption. So you of course would not go through the whole registration process and onboarding of Illinois Secure Choice because you already have a qualified plan. It's just that you need to let us know that you have a qualified plan. And so we call that requesting an exemption. And Jamie will discuss how to do that. It's a quick process. Last thing before we move on, because we are asked oftentimes about this scenario, is what happens with an employer who has fewer than 5 Illinois employees? So the short answer there is that a smaller employer is not covered by the state law and would not facilitate Illinois Secure Choice in the same way that Jamie will outline. Certainly, if that employer had employees who had self-enrolled in the program, certainly that employer could consider facilitating payroll deduction for those employees, but they're certainly not obligated to. So just wanted to address that scenario. Next, I want to talk a little bit more about how we communicate with employers that are covered by the state laws. So in any given year, ahead of a November 1st annual deadline, we start reaching out to covered employers in late July, so about 100 days before that November 1st deadline. I also want to point out that we do a level of pre-screening before we send those notifications, with the basis being U.S. Department of Labor data, specifically Form 5500 data. So that's data from sponsors of qualified retirement plans. We can do some level of screening there, although that data set is not comprehensive, nor is it in real time. So it doesn't catch everybody who has a qualified plan, but we try to do what we can to cut down on the notifications in advance. And then just speaking to what exact modes we're using to communicate with our covered employers, direct mail is our main method of communication. You can see a sample print letter there on the left. We do supplement with emails where we do have valid email addresses available. You can see a sample email communication on the right. In both cases, our data source is Department of Revenue and withholding income tax return data. So just to give you a glimpse at what covered employers will see from us. I also want to touch on program enforcement because this is a topic that generates a lot of questions for us. Want to provide a little clarification here. Per statute, Illinois Department of Revenue, or you'll hear me call them IDOR, has the ability to assess penalties for noncompliance with the state law. Per statute, the penalty amounts are $250 per employee for the first calendar year of noncompliance, $500 per employee for any second or subsequent year of noncompliance. I do also want to note here that IDOR has not historically taken action immediately following any given annual November 1st deadline. So for instance, in 2023, this is the first year that IDOR has pursued formal enforcement action. Their focus this year has been on calendar year 2021. Any employers that, number one, were notified of their requirements before 2021 started, and number two, who are today, as of the date that IDOR started sending notices, still non-compliant. And just to give you an overview of what the IDOR notice process looks like, the first thing that IDOR will send to a non-compliant employer is a notice of proposed assessment. So this letter lets the employer know that they appear to be out of compliance with the state law, that they have 120 days to come into compliance before that proposed assessment amount would actually be assessed. And if an employer were to pass through that 120-day period and still not be in compliance, then IDOR would issue a notice of assessment, which us lay people would call an actual tax bill. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Jamie to talk about what the employer experience looks like, what options an employee has, and where you can look for additional resources and support.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Thank you, Rebecca. Good afternoon. We're going to start and review what the experience is for you facilitating the Illinois Secure Choice program. So just as a step back and reviewing the responsibilities, first is you'll need to register or exempt your business or organization by the deadline date. Now, if that deadline date is passed, you're going to want to do it as soon as possible. And if you have questions around that, let us know. Second, facilitating the Illinois Secure Choice program requires that you have an online account. So we manage all of this online. We call it your portal, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a couple slides. Third, you're going to need to submit your employee information into the portal, process payroll and contribution for participating employees, and that's going to happen every pay period. And you'll want to keep your roster of employees up to date, or what we call administration or maintenance. Now, what you do not need to do, there are no costs involved with this program, so there's no cost to you. There are no fiduciary responsibilities on your part, and this program does not allow for employer matching, so there won't be any employer matching options. Before we move on, I always think it's important to just stress again, we don't want to encourage or discourage participation in the Illinois Secure Choice program because it's their option to make a decision that fits for their retirement needs and wants. So this is something you make available to your employees, but you don't want to in any way sway them or help them with it. It's something that they need to make a decision around. Now, I will make a point. I do think it's important to be part of the education process. And so there's a number of materials and training options that you have available for that. But you do want to make sure your employees review the information and make their own decisions. So now we're going to look at onboarding and what onboarding is going to entail. And for those of us who are visual learners, I think this is my favorite slide because it gives you the sequence in a visual setting. So very first, you're going to receive that invitation or information from the state, and you're going to receive an access code on that information. And you need that access code and your tax ID number to actually go online to www.ilsecurechoice.com, and you're either going to exempt your business if you already have a qualified retirement program in place, or you're going to register for Illinois Secure Choice. That process is very easy. It's going to provide you a username and password so that you can actually access your portal. Once you're on your portal and within 30 days, we ask that you add your employee information. Once the employee information is there, the actual employees receive a package about the program, either via email or print mail. It'll go through US Postal Service if the email is not provided to us. This is when the 30-day review begins. The employees all have a 30-day review period in which they can review their options and determine how they'd like to proceed with the program. This to me is where it's great for you as the employer to be part of that educational process. After the 30-day review, and it shows you really there are three options that employees have. They can opt out, they can customize their account, or they can maintain those standard settings by doing nothing. After that time period, you, the employer, would start payroll deductions and submission of contributions for employees who are participating in the program. So those who have not opted out. You'll at that point also transfer funds to cover that amount, and that's when the dollars will be allocated into your participating employees' individual retirement accounts. So taking this step by step, I want to show you what each step along the way is going to look like. So very first, Christine shared with you what communications look like. Here is an email version with the actual access code noted. So I wanted you to see the 6-digit access code and where on the website you would enter that information along with your tax ID number. Again, you would do this to exempt your business if you have a qualified retirement account or if you are registering for Illinois Secure Choice. And once you get your username and password and you've registered, you're going to see your portal. You'll have access to your own portal for your organization or company. And right there in the center of the portal, you can see those steps we reviewed earlier in that onboarding time frame. It's going to walk you through each of these steps in a very intuitive way because it's going to show you where you are along the way, where you are in terms of status. On the right side of your portal is where you can link over to important information. If you have a question, you think it might be an FAQ, or you want to access employee resources that you can share with your employees to better educate them about the opportunity, that type of thing. And then on the left side of the portal is your navigation bar. So this actually helps you move through the administration of the program. And I like to point out a couple things that most employers, or some, I would say a good number of employers do utilize. And the first is administrators, and that would be, and we interchanged administrator and delegate. That would be individual or individuals that you'd like to work with you on the program. So they would have their own username and password. You can determine what level of access you want to provide to them. And it could be somebody within your business. It could be your bookkeeper or CPA outside of your business, but it allows you to have an individual or individuals work with you. The next is a payroll provider. So if you're working with a payroll provider, many of which have an integration level with Illinois Secure Choice, meaning that they could, on your behalf, send files of information, perhaps for employees who are participating in terms of contributions. That would require a connection with your payroll provider. There often is a cost involved, and so I always say to you, first talk to your payroll provider, see if it's something you want to do. If it is, reach out to me. I'd love to help you get that set up because I think once it's set up right the first time, everything moves more smoothly. And then finally, the bank information. Most employers transfer funds by ACH transfer. It's easy, there's no charge, and the easiest way to accomplish that is to add your bank information into the portal. So you can see that the second one from the bottom, if you add the bank information for your organization or company, you just have one click and you don't have to enter that information each time you're transferring funds. The next thing I wanted to cover is adding employees. Now, we do have an actual webinar focused on just that part of it. It's such an important piece. You're adding employees either by manually entering the information, or we have an Excel template you can populate and upload. So this opportunity is for you to put your information for your qualified employees into the portal. This is what's going to trigger the information going out to your employees about the program. And as I mentioned, I always encourage the employer to be part of that educational process. And there are a number of materials you can access on the website or by reaching out to me or client services if you'd like to supplement that. This is when the 30-day review begins. And remember, a key takeaway here is employees are automatically enrolled. So it's an auto-enroll program. So as soon as you put that employee information into the portal, employees are automatically enrolled, and then in turn, they can make the decision how they'd like to move forward. Next, we're going to talk about the contribution piece. So here is where you would identify who's participating in the program. And this is the type of program where you're going to find that information here on your employer portal. That it's not up to the employee to share with you what decisions they've made. It's their individual retirement account. They can contact client services or go online. They can opt out. They can change the percentage of contribution or a number of other things they may want to customize. But you would identify who's participating and at what rate here on the portal. So you're going to find that under contributions in terms of those who will be participating. There are also opportunities in your messages center on the left navigation panel where you will get updates. Typically an email will go out to you notifying you that you have an update, and messages is where you'd find that. So by clicking on contributions, this is your opportunity to let us know the amount of the deduction you took for your employee. This would be done after you've taken a deduction. So you would indicate the dollar amount and indicate to us how you're going to transfer funds so that those dollars could be the monies you withheld allocated to the participating employee's IRA account. And this too, we have in a how-to webinar that helps employers understand the full process as it relates to taking the deductions, submitting the contributions, and transferring the funds. And then I want to share with you options for employees. Now, employee may be you if you if you have W-2 earnings from your company or organization, or of course, the employees in your company. Want to share with you what it looks like for these individuals. So taking a step back first, looking at just kind of how the flow is again, you, the employer, would upload the information into the portal for your employees or your eligible employees. At that point, employees are going to receive information from program headquarters about the program. You can supplement that. Employees then review their options. They have three options. They can do nothing and keep standard or default choices. They can 2, customize their account, or 3, opt out. After that point, through your portal, you're going to be notified which employees are participating in the program. And for those who are participating, you would begin payroll deductions and submit contributions and transfer funds on behalf of those participating employees. And we always encourage, once you take your payroll deduction, that within 7 days, you actually submit the contribution and transfer funds. And one final note, the savers can't make any changes to their account or opt out or anything like that until you've added their information into the portal. So even though maybe they have advance notice that you're going to be offering or making this program accessible, they have to wait till you put that information into the portal. So in terms of these 3 options that I keep mentioning, just want to walk through what these 3 are. So first one is the option is for employee to stay with the standard selections and do nothing. The standard features are a Roth IRA with contributions starting at 5% and increasing by 1% every year to a maximum of 10%, and then it holds. The target date fund is the pre-selected investment option. Now, the second option for the employer saver is to customize their account. They can change their contribution rate, they can change their investment choices, and they can manage their account, like adding a beneficiary, which we always recommend on financial products. And the third option is to opt out. So again, the employer has to, covered employer, provide this program or provide access to this program to their employees. Their employees do not need to participate. So since it's an auto enroll program, if the employee does not want to participate, they need to take action and they need to opt out. That's something they need to do. Now, the 3 ways to opt out, we make it as easy as possible, is calling our client services team, opting out online, which is in the same website as the employer goes for their employer portal. That's where the saver goes for their account, the ilsecurechoice.com, or they can complete a form and mail it in. So again, any of these can be done once you've added the employee information into the portal. And then in terms of customization opportunities, I wanted to share with you what some of those look like as well. Now, the first one I want to share is that just again, the pre-selected or automatic account for the Illinois Secure Choice program is the Roth IRA or the individual retirement account. And the Roth IRA is funded by after-tax dollars, but the interest accumulates tax-free. The saver has an option of recharacterizing funds, which requires a traditional IRA, which we can open for the saver at their request, and then they can change the after-tax contribution to a pre-tax contribution. This is something the saver chooses to do. It does not change anything with regards to you, the employer, payroll deductions, which are always after tax. So if the employee does this, they're going to have to submit tax forms every year in terms of changing the after tax to a pre-tax deduction or contribution. But the employer is always making after tax deductions and after tax contributions. This doesn't happen often, but it is an option or a way to customize the account. Now, in terms of changing contribution rate, we do see that more often. The automatic contribution rate, as we mentioned, is 5%, and that contribution rate increases by 1% every year to a maximum of 10%. That's a best practice in the 401k industry. Now, the saver can customize this by setting the contributions anywhere from 1 to 100% of earnings. But you need to keep in mind that there is an IRS contribution limit, and you can see here for 2023, the limit is $6,500 a year. Or for those who are 50 years or older, there is a $1,000 catch-up contribution, and that maximum is $7,500 a year. And that's for any IRAs that you hold. Also, say the saver can turn off the auto escalation feature if they don't want to have that escalation portion. And then in terms of investment options, the pre-selected investment option is one that uses a money market fund for 90 days. That preserves the initial funds invested, after which the contributions are swept into the target date fund. We're going to look at these 4 investment options next. So looking at the investment choices for savers through the Illinois Secure Choice program, a couple things I want you to note. One is these are all professionally managed. So they also provide funds that range from conservative to a little more aggressive. The funds are managed by private sector firms selected by the Illinois Secure Choice Board. The managers are State Street, BlackRock, and Charles Schwab. There is an annual asset-based fee. These are standard administrative fees, and they amount to approximately 0.75%. That would equal about 75 cents for every $100 that's in the investment account. Now, we have 4 fund options, as I mentioned, and I want to review those with you. First is the Capital Preservation Fund. So this has a focus on safety and liquidity. The Conservative Fund is comprised of U.S. investment-grade bonds and makes the fund more conservative. The Growth Fund is invested in stocks of the 500 leading U.S. publicly traded companies. This fund is more aggressive and provides more upside potential, but more risk too. And lastly, we offer a target date fund. Now, these have become very popular these days. And I think primarily because the fund actually aligns directly with the account holder's target retirement age. So they're customized. And I like to make a comment here too. The board is very deliberate in establishing the savers options and the default settings. And they continue to be very deliberate in monitoring the investment choices for savers. With the target date fund, which is our standard or default investment selection, as the saver gets closer to retirement, the allocation of assets adjusts to be more conservative, more heavily weighted in bonds, but with the diversification, the saver doesn't have to do anything to make these changes. I think that results in a very effective and a very easy way to save. And I want to share some resources or support and where you can find these resources. And I want to then open it up. Christine and Rebecca will take questions, and let's see what we can help you with. But a couple things to point out. The website ilsecurechoice.com, I mentioned it's the go-to for you, the employer. It's the go-to for the saver or employee. That's where you're going to access your portal or your account. For savers, you can access more information about the investment options. There's a nice retirement calculator. Forms are available for employers. You can access information that's helpful educational information for your employees who are reviewing the program. And then we've got a client services team. Client services team is dedicated to Illinois Secure Choice with hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. So you can see you've got a phone number for employers and one for savers, an email address as well. We offer multilingual support. So I want you to know that there would be no limitations in terms of language and our ability to provide support there. Many of our digital materials are also in multiple languages. And then in terms of training support, we have an employee program overview. We have 2 how-tos for employers. One is adding employees, and the other is submission of contributions. These are all recorded as well. And then we have a program overview for savers or employees who are interested in being savers. And again, this is recorded as well. I'm available for training, one-on-one assistance or help. And if you'd like me to present to your employees, if it's something that you think would help to have somebody walk through the presentation for your group of employees. So with this, I'm going to pass it over to Christine and Rebecca, and let's see what questions we have today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thanks to Christine for the very thorough and clear breakdown of the Illinois Secure Choice program, as well as this change to the Illinois state law as it relates to retirement. As you just heard Jamie outline how you can connect with her and her team for assistance. Additionally, if you're not already a client, you can connect with us at the Illinois SBDC at Bill Bronzeville at in the ways that are listed on the screen, which is via email, on our website, or you can give us a call. But should you decide to move forward and become a client, you will have to sign up online. So visiting that website is very helpful. At this point, would love to take any questions that you may have. There weren't any questions during the presentation. I know it was really, there's a lot for you to digest, I would imagine, and things that you're still processing. But if you have questions before we stop for the day, please type them in the Q&A section or raise your hand, and then I will give you access to speak aloud.
Rebecca, one thing that I'll just say here is certainly we know
Sure.
people might have questions afterwards, just things that come to them later, things they realize or develop questions about later, or they may have things that are very specific to their situation. So certainly this is not the only time you can access us. You will have our contact information, so do not hesitate to reach out to us with anything related to the state law or business eligibility of your business. Are you covered by the state law? How do I actually do this? You know, any of those elements, we're happy to discuss with somebody, you know, outside of today's session. So just want to make that statement so people know they can certainly reach out to us afterwards.
Thank you very much, Christine. Well, with that, because it doesn't look like we have any questions, remember that you can, to Christine's point, reach out to her team for questions. You will receive a survey for today's session. Please share with us your thoughts about it, as well as any recommendations for future training, because we like to provide sessions that are really impactful for business owners. And we thank you again for your time and attention. You'll receive a link to the recording of this training as well with that survey request. So thanks again. Continue to have a great day, and here's to being compliant with the Illinois retirement law changes that are effective November 1st. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day and week.